Is Clara Nicholls, and she is based at the University of California, Berkeley, but also she's the president of Latin American Scientific Society of Agroecology. And she's going to be with us with Miguel for the next month, doing some work along these lines, as she's going to present about the kind of amplification of agroecology. So Clara, thank you very much. Sure, yeah, you want to grab this stuff? Okay. You got it?
Hello everybody. I'm very happy to be here sharing with you. This presentation is based on one paper that we wrote together, Miguel and I. But also I wanted to present some of the examples, concrete examples, how we can scaling up agroecology. But before I start, I think it's very important to mention that in Latin America, because most of my examples, all of my examples are from Latin America, I wanted to tell you that we have two organizations that are working on agroecology. SOCLA, that is the Latin American Society of Agroecology, and also we create another program that is called CELIA, that is the Latin American Center for Research on Agroecology. So it's linked to the students that are doing PhD on agroecology, and also the work that we are doing with farmers in terms of research. So I think before I present how we are going to amplify, how we can scale up agroecology, I think it's very important to, as Miguel was saying, understand what is the root causes of industrial agriculture, and because Miguel presented some of the main concern that we have on industrial agriculture, but I think it's mainly because it has demonstrated that the inefficiency, the dependency, and the fragility of industrial agriculture is the major concern that we have. And this is the reason where we think that this could be an opportunity to do that transformation of this system that created a lot of problems. And next. And we think that we cannot continue with the same mentality, and even that we need to produce more food substantially, but we need to understand that we have less petroleum, less water, and less nitrogen, and also that we have the scenario of climate change. For that reason, we think that all these challenges cannot be met with the existing industrial agriculture that is the one that is causing the problem, and for that reason, we are thinking on another paradigm that is agroecology. And as Miguel was saying, agroecology is a science that it's like a marriage of wisdom from the different, like Western sciences, but also the traditional knowledge. I think the most important thing is that agroecology works with principles that take technological forms if we are working in different parts of the world. I'm going to show the examples from Latin America, but probably you are going to have your own examples here that are very similar, that are going to take different forms, but the most important thing is the participatory approach that we need to work together. And as agroecology, I can say that it's the holistic study of the ecosystem and try to mimic the natural process by crafting an approach that is to rescue the manage of the tailored specific system. This is kind of example from Latin America with agroforestry system, because it's very similar to the natural forest that we have. And the idea is that agroecology, even that Miguel showed examples from more commercial farms. I can say that the principles can be applied with the small farmers, but also with big farmers. But agroecology aims to fill the gap by the Green Revolution. That for that reason we focus our attention with poor research farmers, and also the idea is to achieve the sustainability and avoid the need of external inputs. Another specific thing about agroecology is that it goes beyond one-dimensional view of the agroecosystem. It's not just the technical aspect. We don't want to change one package for another package. And we need to understand the ecological and social interaction of agriculture. For that reason, we cannot depoliticize agroecology, as you question, that sometimes they wanted to just leave out the social and political dimension. this case is very important interaction, the socio-political interaction of the ecosystem. And as Miguel showed in his presentation, we work with principles, and these principles take different forms or practices. The idea is that they are going to enhance certain processes, like biocontrol, or nutrient cycling, or biodiversity conservation. But the thing is that we need to evaluate if these systems are working using methodologies with indicators to assess the agroecological principles. And I just wanted to mention that agroecology emerged as an approach to apply ecological concepts and principles to design sustainable agricultural system. But first, at least in Latin America, agroecology was born in Latin America, and the idea was to solve the problem of poor farmers, to really combat rural poverty, but also to conserve and regenerate natural resources, because the majority of the poor farmers are in marginal environments. And also, I think using the participatory approach and the appropriate technology was how the agroecology started, working in that realities to enhance the sustainability. And there are a lot of evidence of agroecology. As Miguel was saying, there are so many reports, you know, the IPES, the final report of the conference in FAO, and also the ISTD, that are showing the significant potential on the social and environmental gains from transition from agroecological agriculture as a way to achieve sustainability. And millions of farmers, probably we don't have the exact number of farmers that are applying the agroecological principles, but we can say that there are millions of farmers that are using traditional knowledge, and probably they don't call agroecological farms, but they are using agroecological principles. And as Miguel was mentioning, all these initiatives were implemented without any support from the governments, any support from international institutions, probably with less than 10% of the budget devoted to these kind of initiatives. And so the question is, why agroecology has no widely spread? It's so good, what happened? And I think we need to understand the myths about agroecology. First, one myth that many people that criticize agroecology, they say it's opposed to science and innovation. And the other myth is that agroecology cannot be scaled up. That is part of our discussion in this topic. And the other thing is that it's only for subsistence farmers, and it's incompatible with markets. And the fourth myth is that agroecology is low yielding, and this is the reason why it cannot feed the world. And the last myth that they are saying is that agroecology is only for small farmers and poor farmers. But I think the most important thing is to understand what are the barriers, why agroecology has not been scaling up. Because we don't have the enabled policy environment to scale up, and also the lack of right incentives for farmers. Sometimes we don't have special markets for farmers, and little funding available for research. So we receive a little money to do research, to understand the system that works. And also we don't have funding for extension, low number of training professionals on agroecology. For that reason, it's very important to have programs at the university level, but also at the technical level to help farmers to do that kind of transition. But the real barrier, as Miguel also mentioned, is the corporate control of the food system, the control of the seeds, technology, and information from the different companies. For example, 60% of the commercial seed markets are in the hands of 3 companies. 7 companies control the majority of the fertilizers. 3 companies share 71% of the agricultural agrochemical market, and 4 firms control 90% of the global grain trade. So this is explain one of the major barriers that we have to scale up agroecology. And also Miguel showed this slide, but I think it's very important because this is the reality that we have, where the food empires like, you know, Monsanto and even the markets like Walmart or Carrefour are struggling the producer. They dictate what the producer need to produce, and also they are dictating what do we need to eat and how much do we pay. And the goals of agroecology is that because it's a transformative science, we need to understand the root causes of the problem and try to radically transform the way how we produce and how we consume food. So I think the information and the role of consumers are very, very important. And scaling up agroecology allow us to, or the people that are working with agroecology, to use agroecology successful initiatives, agroecological initiatives, to grow beyond isolated farmers that are very successful, but we need to this local experience to share with other people. And this is the way how we can scale up. And not only farmers, but also consumers to know, and through solidarity, help those initiatives to extend or spread among the territory. So how we can scale up? So this is the question that we ask. One example that we have from Latin America is restoring traditional systems. And this is one example from Peru. These are restored terraces in Cajamarca that were abandoned, and now through the help of NGO, one NGO that worked with Clades, they restore more than 800 hectares of terraces that they have, and also the result that they have is 1,122 hectares of restored terraces, benefiting more than 1,000 families. But the most important thing here is how we increase the yield once you restore the terraces. And they went from 5 tons per hectare to 8 tons per hectare of potato yield, and in oca yield they jumped from 3 to 8 tons. So once you restore the traditional system, in this case the terraces, you improve fertility, but also you increase yield. That is very important for small farmers in this region. This is also in Peru, the guaro system, and I think it's very important in the context of climate change. This is a raised bed here and surrounded by water. We are talking here about 4,000 meters above sea level, and in the scenario of climate change, we are going to have a lot of frost. One example that is very important for other farmers is that this water absorbs the heat during the day, releases at night, and it's possible to grow crops in the middle of frost. So this is very important in the scenario of climate change. But in terms of the impact of the guaruaros, and you can see that potato yields went from 8 to 14 tons per hectare per year, and also in another region near in Cajamarca, the potato fields reached 13 tons per hectare per year, and quinoa reaches an acceptable level of 2 tons per hectare per year. So it's very important when you are talking with small farmers, poor farmers, how they can increase 100% of the yield that they used to have. And the other way how we can scale up is seizing the opportunities from crisis. And I think the best example that we had in Latin America is Cuba. Cuba loses the major agricultural input after the collapse of the Soviet Union. You can see here in 1989 the imports of petroleum compared with in 92. The reduction dramatically in terms of petroleum, fertilizer, pesticides, and animal feeds. Around 50 to 80% of the drop on inputs. So in any country in Latin America that experiences this, probably we have a very huge problem of food insecurity. But the case of Cuba demonstrated that all the capital, the human capital they invested in the revolution helped to overcome this problem. And you can see the contribution of the peasant agriculture to the national production in various crops. This was before the special period, when before the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was the contribution in different crops, you know, maize, beans, rice, and before and after. So you can see that the small farmers, after this crisis, started to produce more food. And the thing that why they did that is because they have a lot of strategies. All the countries started to develop alternatives to pesticides. And one aspect that is important is that Cuba has 2% of the population of Latin America by 11% of the scientists. This is the difference between Cuba and other countries in Latin America. And they were using different agroecological strategies like organic amendments, green manure, rotation, animal integration, polyculture, all the practices that we promote in agroecology. And I think this is one of the examples of thousands of farmers that are in Cuba. But this is the farm of one of my students that she did the PhD with me. And this is when they arrived in the farm 20 years ago. Before you can see the reference tree. This is how the farm started 20 years ago, and this is after they started the redesign and using all the agroecological principles to demonstrate that this is like a lighthouse, and there are plenty of lighthouses. And they have only 10 hectares, and you can see here that they can produce protein because they have more animals than other crops. They can feed 34 people per hectare per year. 340 people can feed on this farm. But the most important thing is the energy efficient, that is 30. In the United States, probably the most efficient conventional agriculture is probably 1.5 or 2. You put 1 kilocalorie of energy and take 2 or 1.5. They're 20 times more efficient than conventional farms. And this is part of the thesis of Lady Casimiro, my student, that she demonstrated that, you know, in the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of their farm, at the beginning they have high dependency on external inputs. They started to reduce when they started to do the conversion of from conventional to organic, and then to system redesign with agroecological principles. You can see how they drop the input dependency dramatically compared with when they start. So I think this is very important. And the other thing that Cuba, because they have farmers that they have in the countryside, that they did agrarian reform for farmers to go to the countryside and do agriculture, but also they invested a lot in urban agriculture. And this is one characteristic of Cuba, that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, more or less 20,000 popular gardens covered 2,450 hectares just in Havana. And I think it's producing 25,000 tons of feed each year. Very important aspect, especially because in the year 2020, we are going to have more people living in the cities. So this could be a very important example. Today, urban agriculture and peri-urban agriculture produce 50% of the fresh produce in Cuba. I think this is a very good example. And they are covering approximately 50,000 hectares. And I think it generates more jobs and more creative jobs. This is what the question that Miguel took, somebody asked that question. I think it's very important, the creativity and the knowledge that they have. They have a special program run by the Minister of Agriculture just in urban agriculture. And this is the number of organoponics in the Havana, more or less 3,000 organoponics or units, and the yield is approximately 15 to 18 kilos per square meter. Very productive. And it covers just in Havana 11 1,100 hectares. And the other aspect that is very important in scaling up is mobilizing farmers' innovation. It's very important. This is the concept for lighthouses. How we can mobilize that kind of innovation that farmers are doing. This is just one example of hiding crops from pests in polyculture. This is from Costa Rica, and they have a very important pest that attack tomatoes. It's whiteflies. So this particular farmer tested many crops, how the crops can hide the pest. And you can see here it's difficult to see the tomato plants, but once you take this view, they are planting tomato with cilantro. And the cilantro change the odors of the tomato and also the colors of the tomato, so the whitefly, the pests, cannot find the tomato. So this is like a confusion for the pests. So this is how they reduce the population of the pests using this kind of polyculture. Because polyculture is one practice, but what kind of plants are you going to use is how farmers try to innovate to reduce the pest problem that they have in the particular region. This is another innovation from Brazil. They call the cocktail of cover crops, because they wanted to do zero-tillage agriculture without herbicides. So what they are doing is come out with 9 different crops that they are using in order to avoid the problems of weeds. So they started growing the cover crop, then they passed this roll of faca. It's like an instrument that they invented. They innovate, but it's called roller. They call roller faca, but it's like a roller. It's like a trunk that they pass and they smooth the crops. So you can see here, now they enter to plant the seeds with zero-tillage. And this is how they have beans and corn and no weeds. Why they don't have weeds is because the cover crop, you can see here, have allelopathic. This mulch of the cover crops have certain kind of chemicals that produce allelopathic effect that inhibit the growth of any crop in this particular layer of the allelopathic zone. So the farmers knew, and they planted the corn and the beans deeper. And this is the way how they avoid this allelopathic zone. But this is a chemical that kills all the seeds, the wheat seeds or the crop seeds. So this is the clue, and you need to plant it deeper. So this is one innovation that many farmers in the United States now copy what the farmers in Latin America did or try to innovate. And this is how they are using this roller in the United States. And this is how we can have weed control without herbicides. And the other example that I think is very important to scale up is how farmers that are doing things in order to create resiliency when they have extreme climatic events. So here is working on the ecosystem resiliency, and there are several strategies that we need to look in order to achieve resiliency: vegetational diversity, landscape matrix, and soil and water management. And I'm going to show the examples how farmers are using different strategies, different techniques like agroforestry system, polyculture, or genetic diversity, or animal integration, in the case of vegetational diversity and landscape matrix, and organic matter accumulation, soil cover, and water harvest in the aspect of soil and water management. And the first evidence that I wanted to share with you is the Hurricane Mitch in Central America. And Eric Jimenez, that is part of our network, did his PhD after the Hurricane Mitch in Central America. And you can see here, he compared 1,000 farms, conventional farms, compared with agroecological farms. You can see the differences. And farmers that were using agroecological principles, and they are using different practices like mulch, dead barriers, terraces, suffer less damage after the hurricane than the conventional farms. And this. You can see here that the problem with that particular hurricane was mainly the landslides. And you can see here Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. The agroecological farms suffer damage, but not as dramatic as the conventional one, and they recover faster. So I think this is the concept that is very important to understand in terms of resilience. And the second evidence is the Cuba. Miguel mentioned a little bit about Cuba, but I think it's very important, especially in the Caribbean island. They are suffering a lot of hurricanes, and they are going to suffer more because more hurricanes are going to come. And you can see the difference between after the event and how very diversified farms like this one suffer, but suffer less and recover faster. And you can see here that after the hurricane in Ike, the losses on diversified farms, even that were up to 50%, they recovered. The recovery was 80 to 90% after the 40 days of the hurricane, compared with the conventional farms or the monoculture, because in Cuba also they have monoculture, they suffer more. And the last evidence that I wanted to share with you in terms of building resiliency is the improved grasses that are more vulnerable to drought. This is the case of Colombia, and this is the reality of many farmers in the conventional farmers during the Niño period or drought period. The problem was that they didn't have nothing to give to the animals. So more than 250,000 animals didn't have anything to eat during that particular event. And so with the NGO that we work with, it's called CIPA, they started working on the transition of this farm to a more diversified farm using silvopastoral system. And silvopastoral systems are very important because it's like a forest storage building where you have grasses, you have shrubs, and you have trees that create certain conditions for the animals' nests. And you can see that in this silvopastoral system we have the relative humidity 20 to 30% more, but also we have less evapotranspiration, so the animals suffer less stress than in the neighbor farm that you have 2 or 3 centigrade temperature higher than in the silvopastoral system. And this is the same farm that Miguel mentioned on the sugarcane. They also have animals, and you can see that the production of milk remain constant despite the fact that they have less precipitation or high precipitation. If during the drought the animals suffer a lot of, they don't produce milk enough if they don't have water. So the neighbor farms that are conventional, the drop of production of milk were like 50 or 80% the drop in production. And the other aspect that is very important in the scaling up is the movement of campesino a campesino, how they spread knowledge at the grassroots. And this is how the methodology is that the best farmer or the leader farmer that have an innovation invite other farmers and show the practice that they are using and how they overcome the problem. Other farmers start learning, and this is how it's like a extensive grassroots movement, an horizontal movement. It's a cultural phenomenon where the main actors are farmers, and it's an excellent alternative of how technologies and practices can be shared among the community. And the best example, I think, is Cuba. Cuba, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they didn't have that kind of network because the government provided everything. And so they started to this campesino 216 farmers in '99, and now they have more than 130,000 farmers that belong to campesino. And in this case, this is a horizontal and social process. It's a methodology that builds peasant protagonism. That is very important. It's like the driving force for that transformation. It's very important because a farmer believes in another farmer that can overcome the problem. And the other example is from Central America, how they went from using this methodology, how they share the use of mocuna, that is a bell bean, and because they were using this legume that fixes a lot of nitrogen, 150 kilograms per hectare per year, and produce a lot of biomass. And if you are in soils that are very poor, this could be a turning point, very important to increase fertility and increase yield. And you can see that more than 45,000 families are growing mocuna right now in Central America, and the crop yields went from 400 to 600 kilos per hectare to 2,000. So the increase in production is very dramatic. And by the same time, they are conserving and regenerating soils, especially in hillsides. And the last aspect that is very important is what Miguel was explaining, how we recuperate and restore territories. And this is one example of ecological restoration by farmers in Mexico. This is the heritage of conventional agriculture and the destruction of many landscapes that many farmers, poor farmers especially, are in these territories. And so they started working on this aspect using like a communal work, and they are planting trees, but also building these dishes to conduct the water, to avoid erosion, and to conserve water. Yes, Miguel? And also plant different native plants that are more resistant to droughts, in this case amaranthus. And yes, in this particular region, it's a local NGO, peasant NGO, that did all the work. In the period of 5 years, they planted more than 1 million trees, and they have soil conservation and water harvesting practices implemented in all the community. And also they started to recover certain kind of varieties that were more drought tolerant, and also started to use polyculture to enhance productivity. More than 1,000 farmers are trained in agroecology, and more than 500 hectares are restored, especially in these particular territories that are totally degraded. And the other example that I wanted to show is in Colombia, in La Finca Pinzacuá, in a region that were totally deforested, and they went from coffee production into cattle ranching, past grasses. And this is what in 2003, and this is 2007. True. So because they were using cattle ranching, they moved from here to silvopastoral system. This is 2007, but I wanted to show how the landscape changed. This is the grass that you can see, the ecological restoration here with the soil use in 2003 to 2016. And this is the sequence of the pictures, how the system were changing. And this is with the drone. All these little black things that you can see are animals. So it's how we can produce and restore the land at the same time, and also increase the ecosystem services. Not only they produce, they restore the landscape, but at the same time they are more efficient because they use the ecosystem services to produce. And this is another example from Cuba. This is how the farmers received the land, totally degraded, and they started to redesign the farm. In 2015, you can see how you can transform the farm and the landscape using the agroecological principles. This is very important. And another important aspect of the scaling up is the level of organization. The social movements is what we call the militant agroecology. It's very important to stress that agroecology has been taken by the social movement as a flag of rural development. And also they have seen agroecology as a transformative science, very important because they are committed to the most, in terms of agroecology, the real agroecology that we were discussing with the social and political aspect, not just the technical aspect, are more committed to a more just and sustainable future. And this is the reason why social movements are taking agroecology to recheck the power relation from the farm to the table. All the people that believe on that are joining these social movements. And why agroecology is so compatible with social movements? Because it's socially activating, use the participatory methods to understand, to do research, to share the knowledge. It's economically viable because use local resources and reduce the cost of production is very important, that part. It's culturally appropriate because respect and mobilize traditional knowledge. You know, all the traditional knowledge are part of that hybrid science. It's ecologically sound because optimize and use revitalize peasant systems. And also agroecology provides the principles to reach food sovereignty. This is another concept that is very, very important in agroecology. And you can see in the declaration of the Via Campesina in Mali, they say that they see agroecology as a key form of resistance to an economic system that puts profit before life. And the other thing that they are saying is that agroecology within the food sovereignty framework offers us a collective path forward, the different multiple crises that they are facing. Climate change, food and environmental, public health, and all the problems that industrial agriculture is creating. And food sovereignty depends on making agriculture more productive. It's very important to make agriculture more productive, but also scaling up agroecology strategies that make rural livelihood diverse. It's very important. They wanted the people to stay in the countryside. And also, if the consumers want to be part, they can enter into the solidarious markets. It's very important that people understand why we want the farmers to stay in the countryside. So make that kind of relationship, I think, is very important. And these are the pillars of the food sovereignty: agroecological strategies, social movements, state support. I think it's important to have the state support, facilitate the process, the credits. We need policies, I think. But what we have right now is without that. All the examples that I have shown, except Cuba, didn't have support. If we have support, probably they're going to be better. But for that, we need land reform, access to land, water, and seeds, and also protect the farmers. These are the legal initiatives that we have in Latin America. Ecuador, Bolivia, Guatemala, Brazil, as Miguel mentioned. But the problem, now we have Uruguay that have created new policies, just came out 3 weeks ago, but it's not enough. It's very important, but it's not enough. And this is just one example from Brazil that when they have this policy, they started to create this agricultural credit that is very important for farmers, public procurement, that is the market that the government used to buy from the farmers and donate this food to school, hospital, and food banks. It helps that dynamic of markets for farmers. School lunch programs, they were very, very important in Brazil. More than 2,000 municipalities participated in this school lunches program. However, unfortunately, now it's gone. No funds to do this kind of successful project that they used to have. And the other aspect that is very, very important related to the consumer is the alternative food system. You know, the bypass that Miguel was telling. There are many examples in Latin America how farmers get organized. This is just in Santa Catarina, in a region in the south part of Brazil, with one mayor, in that particular region, one farmer became a mayor. So it changed all the dynamic, and it provides this space for farmers to have their own fairs, and also the CSA kind of program that they have, and also the schools to teach them how to do it. This is another system in Colombia where the farmers are linked to different restaurants and also the different stores in the town, and the consumers are very important elements in this particular example because they are willing to support the farmers, and now these farmers sell the product cheaper than the conventional. So You know, the market opened at 6 a.m. and at 8 a.m. all the products are gone. And we asked the farmer why he keep the prices so cheap. And they said, because the consumer support me when I need it, now I'm supporting them. So I think this is kind of relationship that is very important that probably in economics we can understand, but in terms of how they can make money, but at the same time maintain the consumers that are kind of a very nice relationship. And this morning we were discussing the actors in the territorial level, and it's not only farmers and consumers, there are so many other actors. There are universities, there are local government, there are local communities, private businesses, farmers organization, private enterprises that can be part of this territorial initiative, how we can scale up these good initiatives. And so I'm sorry that this slide was in Spanish. I gave up. I didn't want it to translate because it's so many things, but this is how we can compare one paradigm of the development, of industrial development, compared with the territorial development that we wanted to maintain. There are so many identities and also strengths and articulation that we can have. And we see this, that is very simple aspect that we can achieve at the territorial level, but when we start studying this, it's a very complex system. It's not easy, because everybody is trying to, you know, put their own objective and goal, but at the same time it's how we negotiate between all the actors that are in the community. It's a complex system that needs to understand and give the opportunity of all actors to give the best that they have. All the traditional activities, the agrotourism, the peasant, the training, and also the local jobs that you can create if you maintain these strategies at the territorial level. And the other thing that is very important is how we achieve that. And for that reason, we need to think about territorial level at the local, not at the national level, but most at the regional level. And we need to agree on different aspects. And that we want to achieve the sustainability and the resiliency at the territorial level. We agree, all the actors agree on that. And every group are going to put the bet. They are going to bet for the best strategy that they can provide. The local knowledge, the local economies, the social networks, the biodiversity, and the local culture that are in their territory, the society, the communities and the society, the consumers that are in this particular territory, and institutional base, universities, NGOs, or extension program that they have. All these initiatives agree to achieve the rural development with the cultural identity of this particular territory. And all together we can scale up all these initiatives. And this scaling up agroecology is possible, but will require positive action. We need farmer-to-farmer network. We need research and education at various levels, because we need to see if really we are in the progress of scaling up. And we need public policy environment. We need empowering women, as we were discussing with one of the girls here. Women have been totally invisibilized, at least in the context of Latin America. I don't know if Asia is the same, but we need to empower women. We need to do strategic alliances with social movements, also with consumers, acting in the solidarity, because eating is not just an ecological act, but also a political act. And consumers need to understand that, why we are going to support these farmers and that territories. And these are the drivers of our ecological massification. Summarizing all the examples, I think one is the existence of a crisis, the case of Cuba, that drives the search for alternatives. And the social organization, like the Campesino Campesino, I think is very important, because we think that this is the media where the fabric, the media, which agroecology advance. A network for sharing experience and knowledge. Agroecological practice, effective lighthouses that can show the practices that are working. Mobilizing discourses like leaders of the community that can engage other farmers how to do it. External allies like NGOs or institutions or universities or consumers that wanted to help provide that. Favorable markets, alternative food networks, policies, and also agrotourism could be one important point, because the northern consumers come to the south to demand, but also they can be more solidarious with what we want, how we want to do it. Okay? And this is part of the graph that we have in our paper that I think display more or less the topic that I was presenting this afternoon. Is how we are going to amplify agroecology is, one, reviving traditional farming, if we have it, sharing that knowledge and effective practices with the creation of new lighthouses, or if we have already the lighthouses. And these two, we can demand, the people organize, we can demand the policies, the markets, and also how we can target the research and the extension programs in order to scale up. And all the alliances between farmers and researchers are very important. And also, these help us to conforming agroecological territories. And I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Clara. Thank you, that was great. Questions from the audience? Yeah, back there.
Thank you for your talk. I'm wondering, on the local level, how much does the role of political education? I know Miguel had mentioned earlier, like the FAO, all these things. They take agroecology, but they're not looking at the root cause of capitalism, of how these bigger systemic issues are affecting the current conditions. And I'm wondering, on the local level, how much of that kind of political awareness, or how does it happen amongst the farmers and consumers as they build alternative systems?
I think it's very, very important. Not only at the consumer level, I think consumers need to be informed and educated what kind of food they wanted to eat and why. But also in the case of farmers, Via Campesina is doing a very nice job for farmers that belongs to Via Campesina, not only to educate them why they are poor and all these root causes of the problem, but also the geopolitics of food, that sometimes farmers at the local level are not aware about that. And why this is important? Because, for example, in the case of maize, transgenic corn, in center of origin of corn, like Mexico, this education is so important. And they have a very nice campaign with farmers in defending their own seeds, because now they understand why transgenic crops are bad, because they can contaminate traditional varieties, because they are going to lose the traditional varieties, because probably companies are going to, the seed, they cannot share the seed because companies, they have the right, the intellectual property rights, and they are going to pay, they cannot receive the seeds. So those aspects that probably for a local farmer before were not important, now they are politically aware about that. And the other thing is that now they say that the only weapon that they have to fight against corporation are the seeds, the traditional seeds. So that kind of education, political education for farmers is so important and so strong that now they are defending their seeds. And in the case of consumers, I think it's so important because sometimes people wanted to eat organic because they are more, because they don't want food that have poison. That is more or less the narrative that they use, but they didn't know anything about how small farmers are losing their livelihoods. And once the consumer understand that, they go beyond the pesticides. That's, I think, it's more powerful tool to understand, to be more politically aware. And as I say, it's not just an ecological act because it doesn't have pesticides. It's also a political act because if I go and buy food from Carrefour, I'm supporting industrial agriculture. If I go and buy food from the small farmers, I know that they are conserving the territories, they maintain the culture, they present so many services that this is what I'm sharing with them. And create that kind of relationship, I think is very important. Thank you for your question, very good question. I think it's amazing.
Other questions?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe a bit more, yeah, more critical kind of question, or like, do you think, so there's a debate if local is always better, right? There's different groups which would argue local is always better, and others would say, well, it's not always the case. Sometimes the global system is more efficient, or it creates more equal rights for certain groups because maybe your local tradition is actually not gender balanced, or there's a lot of different aspects if we want to compare different ways of farming across the globe, let's say. What would you have to say to this discussion? Because many times you mentioned the local aspects are so important, and of course we agree to a sense, but do you see cases where they are not better? Have you come across those examples?
Yeah, I think I understand the question in, I don't know if in that particular way, but in the case of, I don't want to romanticize local experiences or local knowledge or traditional knowledge, because sometimes you have places where it's gone. There's no traditional farmers, or I don't want to romanticize that. And there are other people that think that we cannot touch those experiences because they know the best, because they're traditional. And I can tell you that there are so many things that are wrong, that they need help, that they can improve the yield, they can have more profit. That is important for them because it's the economic activity that they are doing. So in that regards, I agree with you. No, everything that is local and small are good, and also that can have that kind of relationship with foreigners. Or like, for example, I'm not a farmer. Miguel is not a farmer, but we can interact with farmers and engage in that kind of improvement of the system. I think this is important. And the other aspect that I think I understand about your question is that agroecology and local initiatives is not just for self-sufficiency. It could, you can export crops. Like for example, in the case of coffee in Colombia. We are not going to drink all the coffee at the local level. We can't. So we need to export coffee. So please keep drinking coffee. It's very important for Colombian growers. But the thing is that we need that kind of solidarious consumers from the north that understand the situation that farmers are facing. For example, with the trade agreement, the free trade agreement with the United States, the bilateral agreement in Colombia and the United States. The United States put certain conditions to Colombia, and that led to the research institution to do certain kind of research to improve yield varieties. Okay, so the research institution in Colombia, coffee research institution in Colombia, created a variety called Variedad Colombia that doesn't need shade. So you don't need to grow agroforestry, just coffee with sun. What happened? when the climate change and all these problems that farmers are facing, this system collapses, number one. Number two, you are producing just coffee. And if the price of coffee drops, these farmers are getting out of business. Number three, they force the farmers to cut the trees, the shade, because the credit that the United States gave to Colombia was conditioned to be more efficient and more, modern agriculture. So they force farmers to cut the shade to receive the credit, even if they didn't want. Summarizing this, many policies that were implemented from the United States force the coffee growers to be more inefficient or more vulnerable to climate change, to pests, to you name it. So the idea is, if you are going to use agroecological principles, using agroforestry system, you are diversifying, not only producing coffee, but you are producing fruits that you can sell in the market if something happens with the price of coffee, number one. Number two, you devote 1/3 of your farm for food security, food sovereignty, and the rest for that kind of crop that you're going to export. They don't negate trade. They need trade. So in that context, I think it's very important because it's something that they are going to connect with more like international markets. This is another aspect of your question. I don't know if going in that direction.
Yes.
But the other aspect that I agree with you, that they don't want it to isolate. They wanted to other farmers from other regions in the world to share the same ideas and the same problems and how they are going to overcome the problem together. And this is how these international social movements are so important. When farmers understand that other farmers in Kenya or in Tanzania or in Chile are fighting for the traditional seeds and so they become more empowered. So it kind of depends what kind of argument are you using for that particular question. But I don't know if I answered your question. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? In front, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to come back to one example you gave. Is one farmer, he produced organic food quite a lot and then put on the market, and after 2 hours it was gone. Mm-hmm. I want to ask a voluntarily naive question, but I'd like to know it. Sorry, the question is why the farmer would not increase the production?
This is a very good question. Because he's an agroecological farmer. He's not an organic farmer. This is a big difference. Because, for example, in organic, as Miguel was showing, there are certain kind of organic farming that are using a lot of inputs. The inputs are expensive, and this is the reason why the cost of production is expensive, and this is the reason why consumers are paying 30% more the price. Okay? This is how the organic farmers are making more profit. This particular farmer, he's using agroecological principles. He doesn't need a lot of inputs. He's using the ecological processes to control insects, to organic matter accumulation, and he doesn't need to apply a lot of fertilizer because he has nutrient cycling. So the cost of production of his farm is very short compared with this organic farm that is like that. So he's still making money selling a low price. And he doesn't want to increase the price of the products because he feels that he is gaining a lot of money now, and he wanted to be solidarious with the consumers. This is a very, very poor town. His consumers are from the town, not from the city, from the town. And he knows that the consumers are not rich people, but they helped him when he was in a bad situation, and he wanted to be solidarious with the consumers because he knows that they are poor also. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand why he does not increase the price, but why does he not increase the production? If it's gone after 2 hours, maybe more consumers would like to buy. So
one thing is that he has only 1 hectare. The second thing is he's alone. His kids are not part of the operation, and he doesn't have the people that are going to work with him, and he doesn't have more land. He can have 10 hectares and probably he can sell everything, but he doesn't have the land and he doesn't have the labor to do it. This is the reality. I don't know, you want to comment on that?
Can I ask a follow-up question about exactly this? I wonder if in a situation like that, we're talking about this now as though the farmer determines the price, but I imagine that in a community like that there is some kind of common more or less agreed concept of this product costs about this much, something like that. So that a reasonable price for an apple or a potato is X or something. Is that?
No, the thing is that as in any country, you know, there are coyotes, or how you call intermediaries, that buy the things from the farmer and they put the price. You know, they are the ones. In this case, because it's direct selling, is the farmers is dictating how much they pay, but according to also the conventional price. And he wants to be fair with the conventional price. And in the case of Brazil, Santa Catarina, they are selling cheaper than the conventional because they wanted to attract consumers. Because they say, I can sell the product even cheaper than the conventional and I'm making money. And once the people understand and try my product, I know that he's going to stay with me rather than the conventional. And I think it's like a strategy how they attract consumers. And it's very, very smart strategy, I think. Once they know how to do it. Because if you don't know how to do it, probably you are losing money. So the ecological knowledge is very important. And I can say that agroecology is more dependent on knowledge than inputs. But these are farmers that their farms are lighthouses that show other farmers. And one thing that I can say, probably he doesn't have land, but in this particular example, I think he's very isolated. He doesn't have a social organization in that particular community, but if, for example, he has other farmers that can do the same as he's doing, you know, they can increase the production in the region, and more people can buy from them, but he's isolated, I can say.
Interesting. Other questions? Yeah,
question. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a really quick question about how many crops does that particular agroecological farmer produce in a year? And how is the climate? And if you cultivate one crop, can you cultivate several times in a year? Because producing 50 kinds of variety of crops in a year makes me so busy to learn everything, and so that the insects for this, and so that the cover plants for this, or companion plants for this, and that makes me crazy. So I would like to know how many crops in a year that he needs to cope with.
Yeah, and before I answer that particular question about Don Carlos, that is that farm that took your attention, that is an amazing farm. I can say that he's my master because I have been learning a lot from him. But I can say that a good farmer or an agroecological farmer is not the farmer that have 20 or 50 crops in their farm. No. Probably that particular farm, he can have 4 crops and be an excellent agroecological farmer. You know what I mean? Not because you have 10 crops or 50 crops, you are more agroecological than mine that have 3. No. Because probably in these 50 crops, you don't have interaction, good interaction that are going to maintain the pests in check. or probably you don't have nutrient cycling, or you don't provide all these ecosystem services that Maya, with 3 or 4 crops, are providing all these services. Okay? So this aspect is very important when we are evaluating using indicators. Okay? They are applying the agroecological principle, yes or no, and you give a value. And the other thing that is important in this particular case of Don Carlos, we are in a tropical country that we have all year round, that we can grow anything, I can tell you. Very, very effective, a lot of sunlight. So he's a vegetable farmer, and he produces more than 10 crops year round. So it depends where you are, because I know that you have constraints in the winter, and I can imagine how to do agriculture in that environment. But in our particular environment, it's possible to do it.
So related to that question, how do you think about the alien species? Because I think it is kind of the farmer's nature feeling that to explore the new crops or new varieties and introduce a new nice species. So, but for example, the old tomatoes and eggplants are historically the alien and new species in this here. But how do you think the agroecology is a mixture of the ecological knowledge and the traditional knowledge? So how do you think about exploring new species, introducing new species or new crop varieties in the specific territorial areas?
I think there are many species, say crops that are now naturalized, that we are now introducing new species into the system. But I can say that, for example, there are farmers that need to buy seeds from outside because it's very difficult for them to reproduce the seeds. For example, there are many hybrids that they cannot get seeds, so they need to buy the seeds from outside. And I think that particular threat that you have, if you are introducing a new species that probably you are going to have more problems, I think it's feasible, it's possible, but I haven't seen any problem in agriculture with this. I have seen using insects as for example, when you introduce a foreign insect to control weeds that are polyphagous, so they can eat on the crop, or the weeds, but also the crop. Once they finish with the weed, they continue with the crop and become a pest. I have seen that problem. But with other, I don't know if Miguel has any example. No, I haven't seen any problem, but it's possible. I don't know.
Well, there has been, for example, when they started the Central America called non-traditional export crops, and they introduced vegetable crops to replace the corn and bean, and they started integrating farmers to the international markets by making them grow things like ginger or macadamia nuts and things like that. So the problem was that they replaced the traditional system by these new crops, and then these new crops started, having pests, and then they started applying pesticides to the point that they got into the ecological crisis because they created the ecological, what is called the pesticide trend, because the pests became resistant to the insecticides. So we have seen that there's many, many examples of collapse of agricultural systems by changing the traditional for new varieties or new crops that have international demand.
But because they are using pesticides?
Yeah, they're using pesticides because these are new crops and there are pests that very quickly invade those crops.
Thanks. Other questions?
In order to have solidarity, I think political awareness, like what Chika said earlier, I had that question as well, but in terms of kind of another aspect is to have a shared understanding of the crisis. And it can be very vague or abstract, whether it be climate or economic, and there needs to be a shared understanding of a crisis that we're in, and people may not feel it or experience it or be aware of it in the same way. But in order to have solidarity, like in Latin America, there seems to be a more unified sense of a crisis, and that can be La Via Campesina kind of doing the translation. But in your work, what has been the most, or I guess, useful way to have that solid, unified understanding of a crisis? Or what do you think is the most useful? Like, is it a scientist coming in and translating these very abstract ideas, and a lot of translations may become simplified. I mean, a simplification of a very complex crisis. So how do people kind of gain a shared understanding that we are kind of collectively in a crisis that we have to do something about? Or I guess it's the...
Yeah, no, I don't want also to romanticize Latin America. Because in Latin America we have people that they don't think that we have crisis, that the best is the modernization of agriculture. Even at the university level, all my professors at the university where I went, they were teaching, and they are still teaching, Green Revolution. So I wanted to make sure that there is no black and white, and Latin America is like the paradise now. Had been very difficult. But the difference between Latin America that I know with the United States, the farmers that I know in the United States and Europe, is that the farmers that we work with, the poor farmers, don't have options. It's life and death. So they need to innovate. They don't have different strategies. Okay, I'm going to take this route or this. No, I don't have money. I have a family, or do I live? I wanted to stay in the countryside. Okay, I wanted to try this. I wanted to try this, and they make sure that they understand, and also exactly. This is one way, and the other important difference that we have from Latin America and Europe is that we have military coup in our countries. Even though Colombia didn't have military coup, but we had civil war that you know more or less. And this period in Brazil, in Chile, in Colombia, and all the examples that are very successful using agroecology, the government at that time didn't participate in anything at the countryside. They were totally forgotten by the policies, and the church and the NGOs started to do different things. And one of these things that they were doing, it was not helping farmers to overcome the problem, but also a socio-political kind of mindset, like change and understand the reality of the global system. I think this is the starting point that probably is not very common in other countries because they experience that kind of thing. And it's like another ingredient to have more solidarity and more social movements started to grow. For example, Campesino Campesino started in Central America during the war in Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala. And farmers were helping each other, and they were sharing just technical aspects, because if they talk about politics, they kill you, at that time. So they were like, okay, sharing and trying to survive, and then they became more involved in understanding the other picture, right? Because they were hiding from the government. There was a very political instability that helped us also to be more, how do you say, more militant and to understand the crisis. I don't know if I answered the question, but this is more or less how I perceive the situation.
Day-to-day survival.
Yeah, one survival, and the second one is the historical pathway that we're forced to have. And it was also at the university that many people understand the geopolitics of food and things like that nature. Not everybody knows, and it's our obligation to teach other people, try to understand the situation. And this is what we are doing in the courses of agroecology. And I think SOCLA is one of the response to this. So we wanted to share that kind of awareness that we have. And it's growing and growing and growing, and more young people wanted to be part of SOCLA. And I think this is one way how people are getting more solidarious to change the food system.
I have a very technical and quite minor question, but I was fascinated by how you showed that farmers had this roller that they used to create a mulch that prevented seeds from germinating. Is that a long-term effect? Does it? How
You know, there are certain cover crops, like for example, Crotalaria. What is the name of Crotalaria? Rafanistrum. It's very allelopathic. They have certain specific crops. Yeah, there are certain crops that have that particular. When they are as a mulch, they are decomposing and providing these chemicals that are the ones who kill all the seeds in these 5 centimeters. And
yeah, the effect lasts about three weeks. Depends on the complex of plants, because there are different chemicals. For example, one of them is butyric acid. And very quickly they become detoxified in the soil by the activity of microorganisms and so on. But it lasts enough to, the effect is not so much how much it lasts, but whether it's able to kill the seed bank. You see, in most soils, the seed bank of the weeds is in the first 2-3 centimeters. So if the chemicals act, in 1 or 2 days, they can kill the whole seed bank. So it doesn't matter whether they last, 3 weeks or not. The important thing is whether they are able to wipe out the seed bank. So it's an interesting process. What happens is that we need to find the right plants for each environment. For example, in that environment, is the 3 main crops are rye. Are you familiar with rye?
Yes.
Vicia villosa and Raphanus raphanistrum, which is fodder radish. But the idea in agroecology is not to copy the plants, is to say allelopathy is the process that we need to promote, so maybe other plants in Japan will be effective.
in the tropics, is Crotalaria is a very allelopathic, but there are so many. Now we need to identify what plants are usable in different environments. I'm sorry, I didn't get what you were saying.
Oh no, I was just wondering if it's that acidifying that layer and you...
No, it doesn't acidify.
Okay.
It's a chemical.
It's a chemical.
It's a chemical.
It's a complex of chemicals.
Yeah.
One of them is butyric acid, but there are many others that basically are toxic to the germination. They affect the germination.
Germination of the weeds, but also the crops. So you planted the crops at 2 centimeters deep, probably are going to die. So you need to. So farmers discovered that because they said it is hot, so they planted the seed deeper. So they just have that kind of information by trial and error. And we, with the research, understand that aspect of what varieties and why they are planting deeper. Because otherwise, you can kill the seeds of the crop.
So
So what kind of plants of the seeds is what kind of plants?
They were planting corn and beans.
So the corn can germinate without any light?
No, it's just deeper.
No, you can't plant it deeper.
Yeah, if you plant deeper, then the seed doesn't get light.
They germinate without the effect of the toxic layer.
Yeah, I know, but usually they need the light, right? Sunlight.
Corn?
The corn.
No, to germinate, no, all of them you need to plant it deeper. Like, yeah, because
it also works for transplant. You can transplant the tomatoes, onions. You have to put it deep, the transplant, so that it doesn't grow in the toxic zone.
Oh, the plants?
The transplant also.
But also there are farmers that are planting, for example, corn at 20 centimeters deep.
But germinate?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, germinate. Yeah, but they put a lot of compost.
I was Hidaka, Professor Hidaka from RIHN. He was explaining that I don't know what region. There's a slash and burn.
I think Ehime.
No.
No, I know Hiroshima.
Another area.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
What's the name?
Fukushima.
So, and he was saying that they use a beam that they broadcast, and then they cut so let's say you have wild vegetation, and then you throw the seeds or the beans, and then they cut the vegetation and forms a mulch through which the beans will germinate. That's very similar to a system in Central America. Frijol tapado, covered bean.
Covered bean. It's a traditional way how farmers grow.
So the farmers find the soil, it has to have a particular type of vegetation. And then they throw the seeds broadcast, and then they come with a machete and cut it, and it creates a mulch like this, and the beans are down here, and they germinate through the mulch. And then there's no weed control anymore. The only work they do is plant, throw the seeds, cut them with a machete, and come and harvest. That's it. They don't do any weeding.
Easy agriculture.
So I would like to see that. I mean, that system here in Japan is interesting because it's very similar to the covered bean system in Central America.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, is there any final question before we? Yeah, in the front here. Let's get this one.
I'd like to ask you: do you observe in the U.S. such peasant movement and also like in practicing diversified agriculture, like what you present in Latin America? Is there anything more or less similar in the U.S.?
No, there are, in Latin America, we have social movements that are engaged in the food sovereignty paradigm, or they are achieving food sovereignty. They have clear idea what do they want, and they are very politically aware about that. And some of them, I cannot romanticize about small farmers and social movements in Latin America because I think there are a distance between Via Campesina social movements, the discourse, and the practice. We have a lot of farmers that are applying agroecology that belongs to Via Campesina, but we have other farmers that have discourse, but they are a little bit far from what we need to do at the farm level. And for that reason, the teaching and the courses are very important to engage farmers how to do it. In the United States, there is a movement of farmers, politically aware, and they are called, they don't talk about food sovereignty, they talk about food justice. And it's more linked to the urban farmers, and also black farmers. And also in the south part of the United States, they have a group of farmers that are very organized, I can say, but they are not politically aware as the farmers in Latin America. They talk about food justice, but no food sovereignty. And something that concerns me, why? Because in the United States, when you talk about revolution, they freak out. They don't want to talk about that. So food justice is more like moderate kind of thing. It's like when we are more in the way to transform the food system, they are more in the way to reform the food system. Okay, give us this space to do the food justice, and you continue doing whatever you want. But they don't challenge the actors that are in the United States. And the farmers that we know that are applying agroecology, like for example in vineyards or in orchards, they're rich farmers. They wanted to understand agroecology, but they are not well organized to demand policies or things like that nature. So the political awareness is lower, I can say. I think in the urban settings are more like, okay, the black farmers are more getting organized to fight for their rights, but it's not as strong as we want, I think. This is my personal opinion. I'm not American, I live there, but I'm Colombian. I don't know if you have, or you that lives in California, have another opinion. I don't know, what do you think?
What happens is that, as Clara was saying, because in the United States, we have no farmers left. There's very few farmers. So the food movement is more urban based. Consumers and so on and so on. There are some small farmers that are organized, but the closest to the peasantry would be the black farmers of the South. They actually have an association, and they're trying to engage in campesino actually. But that would be the closest. There's also a few indigenous groups that are reclaiming land and to start farming. So that would be the closest that I would say. And then you have many immigrants from Asia and from Mexico and Central America that, for example, the farm workers, some farm workers now are farmers. And some of them have cooperatives and things of that nature that could be, similar to what's happening in other parts of Latin America. But the environment, the policy, economic environment is not that different. So I would say that there's not much similarity.
But there is a European coordination of Campesina?
Yeah, there is a coordination.
So in the US there is not?
Yeah, there is one also too.
There is
one.
There is one, but they are not peasants. But they share similar struggles.
Small farmers.
They're small farmers.
Compared with the big farmers, they're small.
Peasant, the definition of peasant is very different. I mean, in Latin America is that, first of all, it's small scale, maybe 1-2 hectares. Family labor, that's the other definition. There's no higher labor with this. And third is subsistence with surplus for the market. So that's more than the definition of peasantry or the Latin American context. If you apply that in the United States or in Europe, it might not be applicable. But I think what the Via Campesina has everywhere, I think what unites them is the struggle, the common struggle that they face. Not so much whether they are peasants or small farmers, whatever they want to call themselves. It's more a struggle that they're facing, because they're being wiped out everywhere, small farmers.
Great. Well, I'm going to put an end to the discussions here. I think we could go on for a long, long time, but let's thank Clara again for the great presentation. Thank you everybody for coming. We're going to, of course, have another seminar in a month in June, but you know, please get in contact with us if you want to learn more about what Clara and Miguel will be up to, and also about the Peace Project. Thank you very much for coming tonight.